You just met someone who is completely, totally sure they're right, and they are completely, totally wrong. Maybe it was a coworker explaining a topic they barely understand. Maybe it was a stranger online arguing with a doctor. Maybe, if you're honest, it was you. Last week. About something you were sure you understood. Here's the strange part. The less someone knows about a subject, the more confident they often feel about it. Not despite their ignorance. Because of it. This isn't a personality flaw. It isn't stupidity. It's a wiring issue in your brain, and it happens to almost everyone at some point. So why does this happen to all of us? Picture a new employee on their first month at a job. Let's call him the new hire, because you've probably been him at least once. He sits through 2 training sessions on the company's software. By the end of week 1, he feels ready, more than ready. He starts correcting a coworker who has used the system for 6 years. He isn't lying. He isn't arrogant. Not really. He genuinely believes he understands the system better than people who have used it for years. That's what makes this so unsettling. His confidence isn't fake. It's just badly calibrated. A few months pass. He learns more, and something strange happens. He becomes less confident, not more. The deeper he goes, the more edge cases and exceptions he discovers. The system turns out to be far more complicated than his first 2 training sessions ever suggested. His early certainty quietly evaporates. Have you ever felt completely confident about something, only to realize months later how little you actually understood? That gap between what you thought you knew and what you actually knew has a name. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Here's the simple version. When you don't know much about a subject, you often don't have enough knowledge to see how much you're missing. The very skills required to be good at something are often the same skills required to notice when you're bad at it. So if those skills are missing, both problems show up at once. You perform poorly, and you don't know it. This idea comes from psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, who ran a series of studies in the late 1990s at Cornell University. They tested people on logic, grammar, and humor, then asked each person to guess how well they'd done compared to everyone else. The pattern was consistent. People who scored in the bottom 25% consistently guessed they had performed above average. Not slightly above, substantially above. Meanwhile, the highest performers often guessed they had done worse than they actually had. Why would skilled people underestimate themselves? Because once you understand a subject deeply, you also understand how much is left to learn. Expertise doesn't just teach you facts, it teaches you the shape of your own ignorance. This connects to something psychologists call metacognition, which simply means thinking about your own thinking. It's the mental skill that lets you step outside a task and judge how well you're actually doing at it. Metacognition isn't separate from competence. It's part of competence. And that's the trap. If you lack the skill, you often lack the ability to notice you lack it. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, whose work with Amos Tversky shaped much of modern behavioral science, described how the mind relies on fast, automatic judgments rather than slow, effortful analysis. Confidence, it turns out, is one of those fast judgments. Your brain generates a feeling of certainty quickly, often before it has actually done the work to earn that certainty. The feeling arrives first. The evidence, if it ever arrives, comes later. This is why confidence and competence can drift so far apart. One is a feeling. The other is a measurable skill. Your brain treats them as if they're the same thing, but they're built from completely different processes. Researcher Philip Tetlock studied this gap in a different setting entirely, political and economic forecasting. He tracked thousands of predictions made by so-called experts over 2 decades. The forecasters who spoke with the most certainty were, on average, no more accurate than random guessing. Meanwhile, the most accurate forecasters shared one trait in common. They constantly doubted themselves. They updated their views. They held their conclusions loosely. Certainty, it turns out, is not evidence of accuracy. Sometimes it's evidence of the opposite. Think about how this shows up somewhere far more personal. not a boardroom, not a laboratory. Your phone. You scroll through a topic you know almost nothing about. A stranger posts a confident, well-worded take. It feels informed. It feels certain. Within seconds, you start to believe it, or at least entertain it, not because you evaluated the evidence, but because confidence itself feels like proof. Now picture two people arguing online about that exact topic. One has spent 15 years studying it professionally. Their answers are layered with nuance, caveats, and phrases like "it depends" and "in most cases." The other has read a handful of headlines. Their answers are short, absolute, and delivered without hesitation. Who does the crowd usually believe? Often it's the confident one, not the correct one. The confident one. But here's where it gets stranger. Dunning-Kruger doesn't only affect strangers on the internet or new employees. It affects people considered experts in their own fields the moment they wander slightly outside their lane. A brilliant surgeon might feel just as certain giving financial advice as they do performing surgery, even though one is their trained expertise and the other isn't. A celebrated engineer might feel completely confident debating epidemiology. Expertise in one domain doesn't transfer to another, but the feeling of confidence often does. Your brain doesn't naturally partition its certainty by subject. It just feels sure wherever it happens to be standing. This is why the effect is so hard to notice from the inside. It doesn't feel like ignorance. It feels like clarity. So what breaks the pattern? Growth doesn't happen in a straight line. It usually follows a curve. Confidence spikes early, with just a little bit of knowledge. Then it crashes, once you're exposed to how complex the subject really is. Psychologists sometimes call that low point the valley of despair. That uncomfortable moment where you suddenly feel like you know less than when you started. You didn't get worse. Your awareness simply caught up to reality. Slowly, with real experience, confidence rebuilds. But this time, it rebuilds on a foundation of actual competence, layered with humility, shaped by all the mistakes and corrections along the way. It rises again, but never quite as high and never quite as blind as that very first spike of confidence. If growth really works this way, then feeling uncertain partway through learning something new might not be a warning sign. It might be a sign that your brain is finally catching up to how much there truly is to know. So here is the strange twist to hold on to. The moment you start doubting yourself in a subject you thought you understood, that doubt might be the first real evidence that you're actually learning something. The next time you feel completely certain about something you've only just started learning, pause for a second. Ask yourself a simple question. Is this confidence coming from real understanding? Or from not yet knowing what you don't know? That one pause won't make you an expert. But it might stop you from mistaking the first spike of confidence for actual knowledge. You just met someone who is completely, totally sure they're right, and this time, you paused long enough to ask whether that person might be you. If this made you rethink a moment where you were a little too sure of yourself, you're not alone, and it's worth sitting with. Subscribe if you want more of the science behind how your mind quietly shapes your decisions, and leave a comment with the moment